Hello, welcome to the Storyline Masterclass. It's a 4-week free workshop for instructional designers that we're putting together. My name is Samuel Apata. I am a senior e-learning developer and have put together this workshop to just collaborate and share with other instructional designers. So you're not here by accident. Can't wait to dive into this topic a little bit more. Our first session is getting started with Storyline. Now, whether you're a newcomer or an experienced Storyline user, I'm sure you'll find something to take away from this workshop. So let's get started. Now, when you first open up Storyline, you might be amazed at the tool, whether it's maybe your first time, it just like any other tool, right? Whether it's riding a bike or learning any other type of skills, it's a good practice to start slowly, find out everything that you need to know about the program, and that's what we're going to do here. So think of this more as a beginner class than an advanced class. Um, I am going to show you some techniques that you're going to be able to apply immediately on your projects. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to go over creating a new project. So how do you get started? How do you create your first project in Storyline? We're going to go over working with the Storyline interface. So I will show you where to find tools that you can use, whether you're trying to add text objects or shapes, play with colors. I'm going to discuss that today. As far as using master slides, that's one thing we're going to cover as well. We're going to talk about how to use master slides to quickly build slides that you can use over and over again without worrying about formatting. We're going to talk about slide types. What are the different slide types that exist inside a Storyline? We're also going to talk about, this is a favorite part for me, is to show you where to find the content library and how to use it. And if you're already using it, you may still learn something new. We're going to go over adding characters in Storyline. So how do you add photographic or illustration characters in Storyline? And all of these are available to you, but if you're not using it, you're definitely missing out. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And just to kind of highlight some of the things we'll talk about the enhanced color selectors, how you can, quickly change colors of certain items on your page. We'll talk about some of the photographic characters that are available. Did you know that each character has over 100 poses? I didn't. It's just a fun fact. And you need to start using them. We'll talk about the feedback master defaults. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So if you're trying to start Storyline, so maybe you downloaded the free version or you actually have a paid version, it's probably somewhere on your computer. You need to find it and just open it up. So we'll give it a minute while it fires up. All right, there's useful information. Now, when you first open up Storyline, you get this interface. So, a welcome page telling you what's going on with Storyline. Here's a good place to find some news if you're interested in that. Information about the e-learning heroes community, which I'm also a part of. Encourage anyone to join that community if you're able to. But for this lesson, there are a few options for you here on the left, and here's where you want to concentrate when you're starting a new project. This is a place where you can import PowerPoint slides. So let's say you already have this PowerPoint presentation that was maybe used for an in-person class, and you're trying to convert it to e-learning. Importing your slides immediately helps you get a head start on that process. So let's take one project, for example. It may even be, something simple where you have this presentation and would like to convert that to PowerPoint. All you need to do is click on the presentation, and instantly it selects all of the slides for you. So let's say you want to exclude some slides, you just click on the ones you want to exclude for whatever reason, and everything else gets imported. But just hold on. Before doing that, you want to make sure that they're imported into the current scene. So there's no need to build a new scene in this case. And we'll talk about what scenes are in a moment. So when you're done, you click on import, and that instantly starts to generate, here's where Storyline is cooking up your project, converting whatever text and objects you have on your slides, converting it into something that's readable by Storyline. And that usually takes a minute, depending on the size of your file. In this case, it's a simple enough project, so I don't expect it to take very long at all. We just wait while it populates. All right, so this pop-up is telling me that there's missing font in the system, in the project. So maybe there was a font that was used in the PowerPoint slide that's not available in Storyline, which, that's the name of the font. I may decide to replace font, but Storyline does automatically replace the font with something else. So you can just go ahead and hit OK. So immediately you can see this is a story view, by the way. So this is more like a bird's eye view. Like when you zoom out of your slide, you're seeing all of your slides. You can scroll down if you want to, and it even automatically names some of the slides based upon what text is found in the header. So you can go ahead and double click to view your course, right? And immediately you can see that this course already has, headers, titles, content. You already have some of that in place, which you can start to, but they're not interactive just yet. If you needed to add some animation, do other things, there's a good place to start. But you do have a baseline, and you can go ahead and preview your course, and it would look just like any e-learning. So that's one way to quickly convert PowerPoint slides to e-learning. You have your menu on the left, it behaves as normal, but you don't want to stop there. Essentially, you want to go ahead and do something else with your course. But while we're here, I feel like it's a good place to talk about slide transitions. If you're transitioning between slides, here's a good place to start. You can actually choose any of these animations, but we'll cover that more in depth in the next lesson. So for now, let's close this out and just select a new Storyline project. So yeah, here we've been presented with the same information, right? So this happened when you click new. You get this options once more, and then start a new project instead of importing PowerPoint slides. So in your new project, think of this as a canvas, right? So here's your stage. Here's where all the magic happens. Here's where you want to add all of your content, right? So the first thing that you do, or in most cases, you would consider is to, change the slide size. So let's say you're not comfortable with this size. You can go to design, go to slide size, and switch that size. So, this is telling you that this is a 4:3 ratio, and this is telling you this is a 16:9 ratio. So it's longer in width, which is what I prefer, only because it mimics the screen size that you see here. So you can, the size of your computer, or most computers are fit well into this, and you want to make sure this is checked. That's that has to do with your slide being responsive, the objects on your screen being responsive. So you want to make sure that is checked. Always check this when you're switching the sizes. You can also set any of the sizes as your default size, for example. And you can also decide to give it a custom size, but that requires a little bit of more knowledge of what you're trying to achieve. So let's just hit OK. But it's a good practice to know, the right size of your slide and how you want it to look. So when you first open Storyline, the first thing you're presented with is maybe your home page, your home tab. Think of this as a folder. So, inside of that folder, you have the home. So the menu is the main folder. You have home, you have insert, it's different tabs inside of that folder, different subfolders. Now, inside of those other subfolders, you now have these options, which, some of them are grayed out, but they start to highlight as you start to create. So let's say you add a text object or a shape on screen. You start to see different options start to be available to you where they weren't available before. So in this case, we are going to animate this object that I just added. In case you want to see that again, you click on Insert, click on Shape, and you select one of these shapes, and it just automatically gives you that crosshair that you see, and then you can drag it out. So let's say you choose circle, then you would have to hold down. You would have to click and then drag it out, holding your Shift button. That just gives you this circle right here. So, and you can come up with other shapes. You can even right click and change the shape to something else. It could be a square, it could be anything else. So back to the home tab. So all these options are grayed out, but when you click, you start to see more options. So this is telling you want to add text, you want to format your text. This is usually, the home tab, and the insert tab is where you would spend the bulk of your time when creating in Storyline. So here you can just type, and you start to see your text populate on the screen. And you can also animate this shape. So let's say you want to give it an animation, you just go to the animation tab, click one of these animations. So let's say girl, for example. If you want to preview that, here's what that does. It just means your element starts off small and then just grows up, and the different animation types you can explore. This float in, the regular fade, white animation. You can explore any of those. Now, besides the introduction, the intro animation, you can also add a motion path, which helps move the object along, where the entrance animation is just show a static animation, right? So let's click on that. This green dot tells you that's the starting point, and the red dot tells you that's the end point, which you can adjust, right? You could bring that here, And when you preview this animation, that just takes that shape, it plays that entrance animation and then to the side, just according to your path, which you can impact when you start to deal with the triggers. But this is just getting started in storyline, so we're not going to talk about triggers just yet. So yeah. So now that you have your content on your first slide, you can go ahead and create more slides, right? Go to new slide, basic basic layout, and blank, or depending on what type of slide you're trying to create next. And it's always good practice to name your slides. So let's call this the cover slide or title slide. And let's call the next one, say, learning objectives, for example. And this is typical for most e-learning courses to have a title slide. So let's delete this guy and insert just text. So go to your insert tab, click the text box, and drag it out however you want. That's not too important. So give this, let's say, course title, and select it all. Give it a nice font, so maybe something bolder. Arial black isn't too bad. You want to make that a good size, depending on your preference. So it's got a good contrast, right? Now, some folks like to put their course title in the middle. That's good practice, but you may also decide to introduce a character. So here's where you go into characters. That's on your insert tab. You click a character, and instantly you're presented with multiple photographic characters. You can also change those to illustrated characters if you want, or you can just make use of the photographic ones. I like the photographic ones only because they connect better. So let's choose this guy right here and add him to our scene. Instantly, he's added to our scene, right? But one thing you want to think about is, he appears to be floating. There's no ground, so it may look awkward. The way to resolve that is to click on him, and without dragging from the top or the side, if you did drag from the top, it makes him look squished. If you did drag from the side, it makes him look awkward. What you want to do is drag from the side, so at an angle, so that keeps things proportional, right? And don't be afraid to mess with any of these guidelines. So just place him in a decent place on the course. But research also shows us that the learner or the audience usually looks to the right-hand side for the important information, whether that's because they're trying to move to the next slide, or we're just right-brained that way. Who's to tell? So you may want to move your text, which is the most important information here, to the right. So your course title should be more prominent, and then you have them just as a guide. And you can change his pose. So the character's pose just by clicking and right-clicking, and then replace pose. That gives you options. Go to content library once more, and at the top over here, you can click to change this pose. There are different types of poses depending on the topic. So, I like this one. So just something cheerful to, bring the learner into the course. And, let's say you want to add a little bit more color to your slide. Since this is a cover slide, usually it has the heaviest design, right? So maybe you want to change the background, for example. You can either draw a shape, so click on the shape, add a square to the stage, or the easy option would be to right click and click on format the background, and let me scoot this to the side so you can see. You can change this to a different color, so that instantly brings some attention to your course. You can either choose to apply it to all, or you can just hit close, which applies it to just this one slide. So I think the easy option would be to just apply it to this one slide. And now you're not able to see your title just as well, so you may want to change that color to something else just to give it a bit more contrast. So white may be a good option in this case. And instantly things are starting to come alive. You have your first slide. Now, for your second slide, so you're trying to create more slide types, right? And what are some of the slide types that you can think of? If you're building an e-learning course, for example, what are some of the course elements you can think of? I can readily tell you, you're considering the title slide, so that's where the course title is located, right? The title slide, make this a little larger. Title slide, we're talking about the course objectives, an overview, introduction. What else? We're going to talk about the models, right? So, or maybe navigation, for example. We want to help learners know how to navigate your course. I can't spell today. Navigation. All right. We can talk about models. So maybe model 1, which has some content and maybe knowledge checks. And we can just copy and paste this. So model 1, model 2, for example. And then you have maybe a scenario to just to wrap it up and enforce the learning. And we can have a final quiz and a result slide. And then we can have summary just to wrap it up, and we can have the end slide, which tells the learner what to do after taking the training. So these are all slide types that we can create inside of Storyline, and they're all available to you. So don't be afraid to explore any of these slide types. As far as transitions, you can actually make transitions between slides quite easily. Go to this transition tab at the top, and you can select from either one of these. That just tells you how things are going to move from slide to slide. And it's good practice to set that at the end of your design, so not during or at the beginning, because you don't really know what you're trying to design just yet. So good practice to wait before adding those transition types, but good to know they're available to you. As far as what to do with this information, I think it's more, how do you create a title slide, for example? We have just created one. So what does a course objective slide look like? Yeah, let's go ahead and try that. So there's a basic layout. You may want to just insert text. Maybe you say course objectives. Again, you go back to using the same font you use here. So just to keep things consistent, make this large enough so it's visible. I would actually go higher. So course objectives, you want to make your course as accessible as possible. I mean, there are a lot of ideas you could use here. You can use bullet points, you can use shapes. I like to use shapes a lot. So, I could put together, like I could put them in buckets where, this is objective one. Um, you know, you also want to format so it's the same color as the one before it. You can easily pick out this color just by going here, pick that color out and maybe add some text. So I don't have any lorem ipsum, but if I did, this is where I would add that. So let's just copy and paste that a few times to give you some content. You can also get creative and add some icons depending on the topic. So let's just search for icon like skills. I felt like I went too fast there. Let's go insert, and you can select icons from the top. So you type in anything you want, say skills, and that just gives you a set of options. It could also be maybe a light bulb, for example. You're presented with a number of options. Think about the style and think about how consistent you want things to look. Are you looking for a line shape, or do you want fully colored bulb? But try to be consistent no matter what you decide. Just click on it, click insert, that automatically brings it here. You can just add your light bulb to your slide. Make sure you're holding your shift when you resize it. And, making it white would make sense in this case. And you can just use your directional arrows to bring it down a bit. Yeah, so instantly you already have content for your first slide, for your first objective. So you can copy that by selecting them all, copy, Control C and Control V, or if you want to do it a traditional way, you can right click after selecting them all, click copy, and then paste. Maybe right click and paste. Yeah, so you have all of that. So that's just making copies of, I see I didn't copy this. I'll just copy it one more time. And you don't even need that. So you need another icon this time because you're probably talking about something else. The same process. You search for skills this time. Think about the icon you have on screen. Like it's got to look something like this in terms of the structure. This looks closest. So we're going to select that, make that white. Things start to look consistent because of the choices you're making. And, it starts to make sense. Yeah, and, you can have maybe one more objective just to wrap it up. And, do the same thing. So instantly you're already having two slide types, which you can reuse over and over again for your other projects. So let's make sure things look aligned. So let's group this by selecting them all, Control G, or you can right click and group them, whichever is easier for you. I like to use shortcuts a lot. So now that I have them all grouped, I can select each one and go to Format tab, and you have your arrange and align text. This, when you hover over each one, you can see what they actually do. So this says distributes horizontally, which is what we're trying to do here. So you click on that, and it gives you that instant alignment that you're looking for. So things look pretty decent. Maybe there's more space here than the other side. You may want to adjust that, select them all, and just you can eyeball it however you want. Yeah, so maybe you have your cost objectives, and you can even add animation to each one of these if you wanted to. But for this one, we're going to talk a little bit more about adding knowledge checks. I think that's one common type as well. So you can right click on any slide and go to new slide and add maybe a graded question. There's one way to add that. So graded question, you can select from any one of these options. So whether you want to create a true or false question or a multiple choice question, multiple response question, which lets you select multiple answers. You can choose a fill in the blank question type. You can choose a match and drag and drop. They're all available to you. So I think some of the most common types would be the multiple choice question. So you can just select that and look for your insert slide button, and that just instantly provides that as an option. So it creates a new slide for you. And here's where you can where you can add your question. So you can say, what is the color of the sun, for example? So your answers could be, say, white. You could say orange. You could say yellow. Always good to have one that's just so far out, say blue, for example. And so these are distracted, right? And I'm guessing the sun is yellow. So let's select that as the correct option. Here's where you can add feedback. So, that's right, you selected the correct response or you did not select the correct response. And you can also go further to explain why or provide the correct answer, because the goal really isn't to fail your learners, it's to help them learn. So whatever helpful feedback you can provide is best. So let's say you did not select the correct response. The correct response is yellow, right? So, you can also massage this bit and say, you're correct. Yellow is the color of the sun. So that helps reinforce that learning. So this is the backend form of that question slide you created. So that's the form view, and you can go back to the slide view by just clicking on slide view. And that takes you back to where you were. So always good practice to, adjust things to where it makes sense. So you want to click on the outside, don't click on the inside, because that starts to look wonky. And you don't want to start making adjustments when your slide is selected like this. So you want to click on the outside, you want to scoop this a bit, and still click in there. You can bring it down a bit. You can make this larger. And you can copy the formatting from this one. So just click here and click on the format painter. That just copies whatever format. So it copies the color, the font size, the font type, without copying the text verbatim. So you double click on the format painter, and then you see that my tooltip just instantly changes. You can see the paintbrush next to it. You're still on this slide, but you can click on the other slide and then just click on this where you want to apply that. And it instantly applies that. But make sure to click away when you're done, just so you deselect that format painter. It's real easy once you try it a few times. These fonts appear to be too small, and you want to click on it, and rather than go in and try to manually change the size of each font, you can just click and then make this larger. So let's say you want a 16 point, for example. Instantly your knowledge check slide is starting to look live, right? So let's say maybe I had imagined this character to be the narrator for this course, just to be the human guide or mentor to help the learner learn. I could just copy this same character. So Control C, or you can copy and then, paste them here on the question slide to, and in this case, you may make him smaller, um, and have him facing the right way. So the way you have him facing the right way is to either you right click and, I think it's at the top here. So go to format and, rotate and flip horizontal. That just flips them the right way. And you want to, there's no reason to be happy here, right? So you may want to replace his pose. So he's doing something else with his hands. You know, Maybe you're asking a question, right? You're gesturing, you're presenting. Those are all types of questions, types of poses you can select. Look for something neutral, something that feels a little more natural. He could even be asking a question, right? So let's go with this guy. And, you may want to have him face the other way. I don't think that's, yeah, this is more natural. So, yeah. So he's asking a question, what's the color of the sun? Instantly you're starting to see your slide come alive in a way, right? And another thing you can do is, add a shape to just kind of provide some sort of background for this slide that just carries true. So let's add a shape behind him, send that to the back, and maybe give it the same color as what we had before. So again, you can do the color selector and just select from there. And that just helps provide some baseline. So it actually looks like he's standing behind a wall or something. And this is something you can also add to the master slide. So you can copy this rather than add it to every question slide, which increases your file size and may not be too helpful. What you can do is, so now we're transitioning to talking about master slides. If you want to design a master slide or make use of the master slides, you go to View and go to Slide Master. So that's where you can add that design to the master slide. Make sure you're at the top, at the very top. So let's assume that this is one of your slides. You can also create multiple master slides. So you can say insert a master slide that just creates a new layout, right? So, you have the first one, which is what you've used from, up until this point. So you're trying to create a question slide, which let's say this is the design you want for your question slide. So when you close out of the master view, still a slide master, right? You close out of this view, you instantly see, well, not instantly. So let's say you didn't have this, right? Because you don't need that anymore. Now, the master slide, you want to apply that master slide. All you need to do is right click and go to apply layout, and you can see that your master slide is right here. You can just select any of these. And that just carries through. So next time you create a new slide and go to, say, basic layouts, you can select the master slide, but it's not recreating that shape. That shape is already on that master slide. So that just carries through throughout the course. Or an easier way to do it is to even just duplicate this guy and, just continue, write a second question, right? So maybe this is Q1. You can have that be a Q2. So let's reduce this to say 32. Reduce this to 32 as well. And we can call this Q2 and just make it a different question. But, for either one of these, let's test out the correct and incorrect feedback layers. Now, these are layers on the side, right? Where everything you add is being saved over on your timeline, which is, this. Yeah, we should have talked about this a little earlier, but it's fine. So this timeline is where your elements on stage are being added. So, that's your character right there. You can hide them, you can show them depending on what you're trying to do. There's your text box, that's your question box, and this is your multiple choice item. So also on the right, you have your layers, you have the correct layer, you have the incorrect layer, which gets automatically added based upon the content type that you selected. But you can always customize. So we already customized this in the form view, right? Where you can also customize it over here if you wanted. It's going to update automatically. So let's say the learner was going to attempt this question. So we're going to preview the slide just so we see what that looks like. So they're presented with this question and they maybe chose a wrong option and maybe clicked on submit. They would get that incorrect feedback. All right. So, and there are different ways to customize that even further. So like I just, depending on the attempts you want to give them, you could go back to the form view and, set some options, right? So your menu tab looks a little bit different. While you're in the form view, you have the questions, you have slides. For the question, you can actually, select if you want your responses to be shuffled or you want to keep them the same. You can talk about how many attempts you want to give your learners, or you want to give them 2 attempts. You automatically see that this try again gets introduced. So that's saying, that answer is incorrect. Please try again. So you can change some of that over here. And once you're done, you go back to your slide view. There's no need to save it. It automatically saves. As far as what your course looks like, we're going to go over the course player in a little bit. Let's preview the slide one more time so I can show you what the player actually is. So your player is what's encapsulating your entire course. So, think of it as your phone or your, what are the options that are on top, what's on your menu, what's, the resources are all part of the player. The submit button, the accessibility button right here, the volume button, that's all part of your player. So how do you customize that to even be more effective and efficient for the learner? It's by going to design and going to player, right? So when you click on player, that brings up this other menu item where, here's where you can select the features that you want to show up on your player. So, this is the menu, right? You can either disable the menu or you can leave it. Again, it's important to name all of your scenes and your slides so you prevent having this untitled name that shows up. That's an instant sign of an amateur project. So good practice, always name your layers and your slides. Here's a resource. So let's say you want to add a PDF resource or a link. That's where you would add that. So just enabling that gives you this option. So, there's no harm in always leaving that on. if you actually have resources to share. So for the slide title, you may or may not want your slide title to show. I think it's good practice so the learner remembers exactly what they're doing or why they're here. So always good practice to rename this. So let's say course 101 is what this is. Just leave that as is. And you can also, choose to have your sidebar starting off with school apps, which I don't think is really necessary in this case. Just here's a place to add your logo. You can decide to pick any one of your logos, whether it's your, client's logo or your organization's logo, and you want to do image from file and go navigate to somewhere on your computer where you have something saved. In this case, I'll use the Starbucks logo, which you can either accept the way it is, or you can take it to Photoshop and even have more spaces around it so it's not so large. And always good practice to check visible to accessibility tools if you want to, or maybe it's not necessary, especially if you don't have an alt text. But if you do want to add an alt text, then you can just say, oh, that's the Starbucks logo, and make it visible so your learners can experience it as well. As far as a cover photo for the slide, it's good practice to select the first slide as your cover photo. That way you don't have that blank page at the beginning, which I don't think is very helpful. It's good to see a preview of your course right before taking the course. As far as your player controls, here's where you can add, check and uncheck multiple features that you would want to be in your player. So you can add the play button, for example. You have your volume button. If you have sound, audio, any type of audio going on, it's good practice to leave that option for the learner to be able to adjust the volume as desired. You can choose to have captions, closed captions in your course. You can choose to make your course full screen, give the learner that option to, in a nutshell, the more options you can provide for your learner is always better. Or is usually better depending on the type of course. There are use cases for everything. It's better to have a sig bar where the learner knows how much of content or how long the audio is going to play. I think it is. And even when you do that, do you want to allow the user to track the sig bar, or do you want to make it read only where they're only able to just see it, or do you want to allow drag after completion? I would go for this option. So, as far as the other menus, you can go to menu. Here is, exactly what this is. So, in this case, we don't need this first one. You can delete it and keep the children. So that's the sub menus. So keep that. So maybe when setting up your menu, right? Maybe this is your question slide, for example, or your knowledge check introduction. So, we may want to change this to, we may want to rename this. So maybe say knowledge check and, make this children of that first one. So you make that the children, and then, in that case, you can collapse and, you see how that instantly updates over here. And then you can, do other things like add resources, for example. Here's how to add a new resource. So you can go add a URL, for example, and I think there's some demo URLs in there already. You can click on that and, enter the title of the URL and, hit save. That instantly adds that to the resources over here. You can also share a file, for example. So click on File, go to Browse, and choose to select from any, in this case, I would just go with the same logo, click Open, and that instantly populates. And you can even rename what resource you're sharing. And once you hit Save, that saves it in that resource section. You can add a glossary to your course. So let's say there's some new words that the learner may encounter. Is where you can add the name of that word and the definition, and that automatically shows up when you have glossary checked. I don't use that a lot, but I can see that being useful in financial courses and the likes. And there may be cases where you want to, turn off your player altogether. I've done that several times for, just demo projects that I've created. You can just hit, make that all disappear. So you don't have any controls. It's just a full screen player, and you can bring that back if you wanted to. Always good practice to leave your modern style, although you can also for the classic style, which is what Storyline used to look like. Depending on your preference. I do like the buttons over here. So my goal usually is to design the modern in a way that mimics the classic. So it adds the color, which you can affect over here. So you can change the color to something dark, which it's already dark. You can make it light, or you can, choose a custom color if you wanted. And here's where you can change that custom color. So depending on your brand that you're working with. In this case, we're designing for, say, Starbucks. So maybe something green will be useful. Yeah, I'm not saying pure green, but you get the idea. All right. So, all right, let's keep it light. So one thing I did forget to mention in the menu is that you can make that either free or restricted, where the learner has to go through the content before moving on. Depending on the type of course you create. And if it's a compliance course, you may want to restrict movement a little bit, but don't do it in a way that, keeps the learner from getting to the content that you're trying to create. So back to, text labels, those are more advanced uses that is used to control the types of labels that you see throughout the course. And what else? So for colors and effects, it's always good practice to, at least for me, it's good to use icon and text. You see that? So if you use icon alone, the learner may not know what to do or know what those are for. But if you use text alone, you lose that directional arrows. That would just play it safe and use the previous and next arrows. So this gives your learners the ability to move between slides instantly. And as far as your player fonts, I like to use Lato a lot for my body text. But Open Sans is the default font, so you can keep it that way or change your fonts over here. And once you're done, you can either save your customization so you can reuse it over and over again, or you can it automatically saves for this project, so you can just hit OK and it applies all of those changes. And we can test it out so you can see exactly what the difference is. Yeah, so instantly you see that logo pop up, and now the course is, we have the resources over here, which we just added. You have the name of your course. You have the sub menus, which you can expand and retract however you want. And you see that you can't move on to the next lesson unless you complete a lesson. You see your what's it called? You see the seek bar down here that shows how long that slide takes. So the default is 5 seconds, but if you have audio, it may play on for much longer. You have your volume controls over here. You have your full screen over here, which isn't available in this preview, but you know, then you can move on to your next lesson. And it checks off each lesson as you move along, which is an awesome way to view things. You have your course objectives, which in this case we named it knowledge checks, but you can move on to your questions. Things start to look professional, right? You make a wrong choice, you get the ability to try again. This time you want to say yellow, yay. That's the correct response. And hit continue and move on with the course, which is what you want. Now, all of this is you trying to build your course from scratch. Now, what if I told you there's an easier way to do this? So the easier way to do this, just like learning how to ride a bike, you want to put on some training wheels at the beginning so you don't fall. So the training wheels in this case is the content library. And the way to get to the content library is to click on slides and click on content library. That automatically gives you the ability to add templates to your course. And Storyline already has a number of templates for you to add. So why reinvent the wheel? So let's say you're just starting out a Storyline. It's best to use some of these templates to even understand what things should look like, or how to build. And you can either choose from all these options. They're all available right now, but you would have to dig for them. But if you wanted to narrow your choices, you can click on light or dark, depending on what choice you want. In this case, I would like to use maybe a light presentation. So, here are the options. You can select from the different slide types there are. So here's a welcome page, for example. I think we already have one, so we don't need that. You can select from, section titles and maybe model one. You want to get some instructions, and the whole time you click on Control or Shift just to make that selection. We already have objectives, so we don't need that. You want to make a major point. You want to try a 50-50 slide where it's 50% text and 50% images, or do you want to try a 60-40 slide where it's 60% image and 40% text? Do you want to try a multiple choice question, not a multiple choice question, or even a timeline? Here's where you can select all of that. So let's say we want to import these 7 slides to our course. We have them selected. All we need to do is click on insert 7 slides, and it automatically will populate those slides. All right. So instantly you already have what you need to, further customize this course. So one way would be to keep things consistent. So maybe you like the blue, go to format and change, select that blue that you've been using the whole time. Oops. Or maybe you want something more accurate. You can go back and look for the hex code. So here's where you can get the hex code. Go back to the same way you did that format and copy the hex code from here. Close that out, and you can paste that hex code for this shape. So go to shape fill and then paste the hex code here. And that just gives you that same blue that you're looking for. All right. And you can change this fonts based upon whatever fonts you've been using. So in this case, we've been using Arial Black and Open Sans. So we can change this to Arial Black and change this to Open Sans. And you can just type it. and maybe you may want to match the same font size, which is 16 in that case, just to keep things consistent, right? Just to keep things consistent. So, you do the same for, and, you don't have to keep, repeating it. You can use that format painter that we talked about early on. So maybe you change this to Open Sans, maybe 14 or 16 is a good size for this. You can just go to Format Painter, double click on it, and instantly you can affect what that looks like, right? Without even doing too much. Where I think one thing I forgot was to make this black text, which you can still do, and we can still go over the Format Painter one more time and change all of that. Yeah, and things start to look, change this arrow black, and things start to look more consistent. In any case, it's, I think all of this is just, scratching the surface for what Storyline can do. I really want to keep the sessions as short as possible. So I think we'll cover this a little bit more in the next sessions, which, hopefully you can join us for. It's been a pleasure. I'll see everyone next time. Bye.